It all happened when I was 18 and just started college. Back then, I was living in a small on-campus apartment with my friend. Nothing fancy, just 2 bedrooms, a small living area, and a shared bathroom. We were pretty settled and got along well, but one day, out of nowhere, our third roommate moved in. This guy's name was Alex, and let me tell you, he didn't look like any other college freshman I'd seen around. The moment he walked in, I couldn't help it, my jaw actually dropped. I mean, this guy looked like he could be a legit model. He had these brown curly locks that looked like they belonged in some magazine ad, a solid build with muscles in all the right places, and this intense, almost piercing look in his eyes. Like he actually made eye contact and gave this friendly nod, and I just felt my stomach twist. He looked so damn good, I'm not even kidding. I'd never seen anyone who made me feel that instant pull before. I'd been out as gay to my friends since high school, so I didn't have any confusion or question about it. I just knew this guy right here was the hottest guy I'd ever laid eyes on. So yeah, within that first 5 seconds of meeting him, I was already melting a little on the inside. It was one of those moments you know you'll never forget. So to jump right in, Alex and I got along surprisingly well from the start. We'd only known each other for maybe a couple of days, but there was this effortless vibe between us that just clicked. We'd sit around after classes, talking about all kinds of stuff, music, movies, dumb stuff we'd done as kids. It was so easy that I started feeling like maybe there was more to him than just being insanely attractive. Like he had this genuine warmth to him that just pulled you in. Now, I'll admit it, I was testing the waters whenever we talked, dropping little hints here and there, trying to figure out if he was into guys. I wasn't being too obvious, but, you know, just enough to see if he'd bite. I'd throw in a comment about how attractive some guy in a show was or make a joke about dating life. But nah, he seemed totally straight. He mentioned this girl he dated back home, talked about some dates he'd been on, and even had a picture of her on his phone. So yeah, as far as I could tell, he was into girls and not even the slightest bit curious. Fast forward to this one random night, my friend, our original roommate, was off somewhere at a party, and it was just me and Alex hanging out in our place. We had a couple of drinks, nothing too wild, just enough to get a little buzzed. I remember we were sitting on the couch, both of us scrolling through our phones, the lights dimmed low. It was chill, just one of those relaxed, quiet nights. And I don't know what got into me, maybe it was the few beers I'd had, or maybe it was that lingering what if that had been in my mind since he'd moved in. But as I looked over at him, seeing him lying there in just his boxers, looking all relaxed, I thought, screw it. I figured I had nothing to lose. So I went for it. I crawled over under the blanket and slipped in next to him, lying down behind him. My heart was pounding. I could feel it in my chest, just racing. I didn't even know if he'd freak out, but something inside me just said to go for it. So there I was under the blanket, and I reached out to hug him from behind. I could feel the warmth of his skin, his muscular back pressing against me, and I swear I was holding my breath, just waiting to see what he'd do. For a second, he didn't move, and I thought maybe he'd just ignore it or pretend like it didn't happen. But then he turned his head a little, like he was about to say something or yell, "What the hell are you doing?" And before he could, I just went for it. I reached up, grabbed his face, and leaned in to kiss him right on the lips. I know it sounds crazy. I barely knew the guy, and here I was, kissing him out of the blue. But in that moment, I was on the edge. All I could think about was how much I wanted him. I felt him start to tense up, like he was going to push me away, and for a split second, I thought I'd really blown it. But then, gradually, his grip loosened. He didn't push me off. Instead, he let me kiss him. And after a few seconds, I could feel him starting to respond, kissing me back. It was like this rush of relief and excitement all at once. I hadn't expected it, but there we were wrapped up in each other. He tasted like the beer we'd been drinking, and his lips were soft, but his stubble scratched against me, making it feel even more real. There was this tension between us that just exploded into something way more intense than I could have imagined. I felt his hands reaching up, gripping my shoulders, and even though it started out hesitant, it didn't take long for him to get into it. I remember running my hands over his body, feeling the lines of his muscles. It was everything I'd imagined and more. His chest was firm, and he had these defined abs that I could feel under my fingertips. He had this raw strength, and just touching him made my whole body light up. It was like I was finally exploring something I'd wanted for so long, and now that it was happening, I couldn't get enough. Once he stopped pushing, I leaned in closer, deepening the kiss, and felt that rush of relief, like he was actually into it too. I felt his hands ease up, and we just started kissing like neither of us could stop. I ran my hands over his body, feeling every detail, his broad shoulders, those hard biceps that I'd noticed when he'd been working out. I couldn't believe how solid he was, like all muscle, and I took my time just exploring him, feeling the warmth and the strength under my hands. His chest, his abs, everything about him was like the perfect combination of strength and softness, and it was driving me crazy. I'd been wanting this since the moment he'd moved in, and here I was, finally getting to experience all of him. I could feel his breathing get heavier as I ran my fingers down his sides, tracing the lines of his muscles. He had that solid build that just felt amazing to touch, like I'd imagined 1,000 times, but way better because it was actually happening. Under the blanket, things got more intense. We were wrapped up in this little space, and there was nothing between us, just the warmth and the feel of his body pressed against mine. I don't need to spell out every detail, but I'll say that it felt like everything I'd wanted for so long. I took my time, letting my hands explore every inch of him, getting lost in the moment. His skin was warm, and I could feel his body reacting, like he was just as into it as I was, even if he'd never been with a guy before. That thought crossed my mind, that maybe this was all new to him, but he was letting it happen, letting himself experience it without holding back. Eventually, things escalated and, well, we didn't stop. It was intense, passionate, and honestly, it felt like a dream. I remember thinking I couldn't believe this was actually happening, that Alex was letting me get this close, letting me feel him like this. His body, the way he responded, the way he touched me back, it was clear that he was getting into it. It was like he was discovering something new, something he didn't even know he wanted until right then, and that only made it better. I knew in the back of my mind that we were taking a huge risk. If our other roommate came back, he could walk in at any second. But in that moment, nothing else seemed to matter. It was like we were in our own world, wrapped up in each other, letting go of everything else. The way his body reacted to my touch told me everything I needed to know. Despite whatever hesitation he might have felt at first, I could feel that he was into it, letting himself enjoy the moment, letting himself experience something new. I felt his hands running down my back, gripping me with a kind of urgency that matched my own. His strength was undeniable. He held me in a way that made me feel like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. His touch was a mix of rough and gentle, and the way he held me only added to the intensity of the moment. I could feel the heat between us building, this electric current that seemed to flow from him to me and back again. Things kept building between us, and I could feel him responding, his body arching under my touch, his breaths coming quicker, these soft sounds escaping him that made it all feel even more intense. It was like he couldn't hold back anymore, and I could feel the tension rising, this incredible closeness taking over as we moved together. Then, right at that moment when things were reaching their peak, I heard a voice echoing down the corridor. It took me a second to register, but sure enough, it was Marcus, our other roommate, shouting something as he walked back toward our room. My heart skipped a beat, and I knew I had to think fast. We were so close to finishing, and I wasn't about to let this get interrupted now. I tried to block out Marcus's voice and focused on the moment with Alex, letting everything else fade into the background. We managed to finish just before Marcus made it back to the room. It was intense, this last-second rush of urgency mixed with the heat between us. Afterward, I slipped out, my heart still pounding, and headed straight to my bed, grabbing my phone and pretending like nothing had happened. I tried to look casual, like I'd just been lying there all alone, scrolling through my screen. When Marcus came in, he didn't seem to notice anything unusual, and I just kept my head down, focusing on my phone to keep the whole thing under wraps. It was one of those moments where I couldn't believe we'd pulled it off, but the thrill of it all just made the memory even stronger. Even though it was risky, it felt worth it, like something we'd both remember for a long time. Alright, here's the fifth message, focusing on the connection and details in a straightforward way. The next day, I didn't know what to expect. Part of me thought maybe Alex would avoid me, act like it didn't happen, or maybe even freak out about the whole thing. But that morning, when he came over to me, he didn't seem upset or weirded out. In fact, he looked almost curious. He sat down across from me, a little quiet, but then he told me straight up that this was the first time he'd ever done anything with a guy. He admitted he hadn't ever thought about it seriously before, but he said he really liked what happened between us. It was the last thing I expected to hear, but damn, it felt good to know he wasn't running for the hills. Then he looked at me and said we should do it again sometime. I mean, right then, I had this mix of relief, excitement, and surprise. I'd hoped he'd enjoyed it, of course, but I didn't expect him to actually want to try it again, especially not so soon. I agreed, obviously, but we both knew we'd need to be careful. It's not like we had the place to ourselves all the time, and our other roommate could come back anytime, so we had to find the right moment. Later that evening, our other roommate, Marcus, was out at a party, and Alex came back to our room, giving me this look that told me he was definitely interested in picking up where we left off. We both kind of laughed about it, a little nervous but clearly both ready to go. We waited a bit to make sure Marcus was really out for the night, then headed to his bed since it was closer to the wall and felt a little more private. This time, things were slower, more intentional. We weren't drunk, so it felt different, more intense, if that makes sense. I felt like I could take my time, really explore him, and see how he responded. I remember running my hands along his arms, his chest, taking in every detail. His body was firm, muscular, but he was gentle in the way he touched me back. We started off just making out, and it was even better than the night before. Now that we both knew we wanted it, there was this connection between us that made every touch feel that much more intense. At one point, he pulled me closer, his hands strong on my back, and I could feel the heat between us building up. It was intense, but also oddly comfortable, like we both knew this was what we wanted. He was exploring too, touching me, getting familiar with my body, and I could tell he was getting more confident, letting himself go. I could feel his hands gripping me tighter, pulling me closer as things got more heated. I won't get into all the specifics, but I'll say that it was everything I'd hoped for and more. There was this one moment that stood out. He looked at me, like he was still trying to figure out how he felt about all of this, and then he just let go of whatever doubts he had. His grip got a little stronger, his touch more certain, and I could feel him fully giving into the moment. It was both intense and comforting at the same time, like we were both discovering something we hadn't expected. He had a certain strength that was obvious, but his touch was still careful, making sure I was comfortable. At one point, yeah, it got a little uncomfortable for me. Alex was, let's just say he was on the larger side, and it took a minute to adjust. But he was patient, slowing down to make sure I was okay. After the initial discomfort, it became easier, and I started to relax, letting myself get lost in the moment. Soon, it was only pleasure, and we both settled into a rhythm, finding a way that worked for both of us. We moved together in sync, the room filled with just the sounds of us, and it was like the rest of the world disappeared. He had this way of holding me that made me feel safe, but also completely exhilarated, like I could just let go and be fully present with him. His hands gripped me firmly, pulling me closer, and I could feel his strength in the way he held me, supporting me. It was intense, physical, but also emotional in a way that caught me off guard. By the end, I could barely catch my breath. We lay there in his bed afterward, just resting together. I remember lying on his chest, feeling the steady rise and fall as he caught his own breath. His hand was in my hair, stroking it gently, and it just felt right, like we were both exactly where we wanted to be. It was surprising how natural it all felt, just lying there, wrapped up in each other. I'd never had a connection that felt so effortless and intense at the same time. When I looked at him afterward, he had this look on his face, a mix of satisfaction and maybe a little surprise, like he couldn't believe what had just happened either. We didn't really need to say anything. It was like we both understood what it meant, that we'd crossed this line together, and neither of us regretted it. I lay there with my head on his chest, and for the first time, I felt this deep sense of contentment, like I'd found something I didn't even know I was looking for. Lying there on Alex's chest afterward, I felt like I'd hit some kind of jackpot. His breathing was calm, his chest rising and falling under my head, and he had one hand resting on my shoulder while the other was gently stroking my hair. It was one of those moments where time felt like it stopped, where everything was just right, and I couldn't believe how it all came together so quickly. Just a couple of days ago, I was barely daring to look at him for too long, and now here we were, lying together like this. I realized in that moment just how much I wanted this, not just the physical connection, though that was incredible, but the feeling of closeness, of being wanted by someone I never thought would even consider it. Alex had this calm strength about him, and being next to him felt like everything just fit. I didn't know what this would mean going forward, or if he ever even want to do it again. But in that moment, I felt like I didn't need to worry about any of that. I just wanted to soak in the feeling of being with him. We must have stayed like that for a good half hour, just lying there quietly. His fingers kept running through my hair, and I found myself closing my eyes, feeling so content. I don't think I'd ever been that relaxed with anyone, let alone a guy who I never thought would be interested. And for him to be so gentle afterward, it really hit me how much I wanted more of this. The closeness, the warmth, the feeling of having someone who didn't push me away, but actually welcomed me in. It was all so unexpected, but perfect. Then, just as I was starting to drift off in that warm, content feeling, we heard the door open. At first, I barely registered it, but then I heard the unmistakable sound of Marcus's voice, our other roommate. I was jolted back to reality, still lying there half-draped over Alex. My heart practically jumped out of my chest. Marcus walked in and he froze. I could tell by his face that he hadn't expected to see us like that, lying in each other's arms. He just stood there, blinking at us, probably not knowing what to make of it. It was awkward, to put it lightly. Marcus just kind of grimaced, looking both shocked and maybe a little disgusted, and he muttered something under his breath, something I didn't fully catch, but I could tell it wasn't friendly. He stood there, staring at us, and then he finally said, "Well, this is not what I expected. From the first day, I figured you two were both, you know." He didn't need to finish the sentence. I got what he was saying. It was the classic slur, the fifth word, and he tossed it out like it was nothing. I could feel Alex tense up next to me, like he wanted to get up and explain, maybe, or defend himself. But I didn't let go. Instead, I held onto him, and I found myself saying, "Marcus, it's none of your business. Why are you even back so early?" I don't know why I said it. It just came out, like I needed to defend us, to make it clear that we didn't owe him an explanation. Marcus just scoffed, shaking his head like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He muttered something about needing to air out the room and said we had 10 minutes to get dressed before he'd come back. After he left, the tension in the room lifted a bit. Alex and I looked at each other, and we both just started laughing. The situation was so bizarre, so unexpected, that laughing felt like the only option. Here we were, having just spent the night in this intense, private moment, only to be interrupted by our annoyed roommate coming back early and calling us out. It was ridiculous, and I could see the humor in it, even though it stung a little. We sat up, got dressed, and tried to pull ourselves together, but we couldn't stop smirking at each other. The whole thing was surreal, but there was this unspoken understanding between us, like we knew what had just happened was something we both wanted to hold on to. Alex reached over, squeezed my shoulder, and gave me this look that I can only describe as grateful, maybe. Like he was glad we'd been through it together, and even with the awkwardness, he didn't regret it. Once Marcus came back, we were both sitting on our beds, pretending to scroll through our phones like nothing had happened. Marcus walked in, opened the window dramatically, making a big show of airing out the room. He didn't say much after that, just gave us a look and shook his head. Alex and I couldn't help but exchange a quick, knowing smile. The whole thing felt like this weird, unplanned bonding moment, a secret we were both in on, even if it wasn't exactly under the best circumstances. Afterward, things didn't magically change overnight. We didn't start dating or anything like that, but something was definitely different between us. There was this closeness, this understanding, like we both discovered something new together. Over the next few weeks, whenever we had a chance to be alone, he'd make a point to come over, sit close to me, or even just give me a little nudge, like his way of saying he hadn't forgotten. And yeah, there were a few more nights like that, where we got to share that connection again, just the two of us. It was a few days after our first time together, and things had settled into this weird, quiet excitement between us. We weren't openly talking about what had happened, but there were these looks, these small moments where Alex and I would catch each other's eyes, and it was like this unspoken agreement hung between us. We didn't have to talk about it directly. We both just kind of knew we'd crossed a line, and I guess we were both testing what that meant. So one morning, I was getting ready to head out for classes when I heard the shower running. We had a shared bathroom set up in the dorm, so everyone knew everyone's routines pretty well. And by then, I knew that when Alex hit the showers in the morning, it was usually after his early workout. I don't know what got into me that day. Maybe it was just knowing we'd already crossed that line, or maybe it was how things were left that made me wonder what would happen if we went further. So I headed to the bathroom, and I could hear the water running, steam already starting to seep out into the hallway. I didn't even knock. I just pushed the door open, heart pounding. There he was, back to me, water streaming down over his shoulders and back. I don't know what he thought when he heard the door, but when he turned around and saw me standing there, he didn't look shocked, didn't tell me to leave. He just looked at me, and for a second, we were both just standing there, neither of us saying a word, like we were both daring each other to see who'd break the silence first. And then I stepped forward, closing the space between us. I could feel the heat from the shower on my skin, the steam thick in the air around us. His eyes were watching me, still with that look of curiosity mixed with something else, something I couldn't quite read, but that kept pulling me in. I reached out, placing my hand on his chest, feeling the warmth of his skin under my palm, the water still dripping down between us. He didn't move, didn't push me away. He just let me get closer, like he'd been waiting for this moment too. As I leaned in, we started kissing, and it was slower this time, more deliberate. I could feel his breath against my skin, the warmth of the water mixing with the warmth coming from him, and it was intoxicating. The feel of his hands on me, firm but gentle, made me feel like I could just lose myself in the moment. There was no rush this time, no hurried excitement, just this steady, building intensity between us that felt like it had been simmering since that first night. I ran my hands over his shoulders, down his arms, feeling the strength in his muscles, the way they tensed slightly under my touch. The water kept running down over us, and it just added to that feeling of being wrapped up together, like nothing else mattered outside that shower. I could feel every inch of him, and he was holding on to me too, like he didn't want to let go, like he wanted to savor every second. We didn't say anything. Words didn't feel necessary or even possible in that moment. We just kept moving together, letting our hands and the closeness say everything we couldn't put into words. His hands roamed over my back, pulling me in closer, pressing me against him, and it was like the heat between us just kept building, making the rest of the world fade into the background. Eventually, I felt him guiding me back against the wall, his hands firm but careful, making sure I was comfortable. It felt incredible, feeling his solid frame against me, the water still cascading over us, making everything feel even more intense. His touch was steady, and I could feel how much he was holding himself back, keeping it controlled, not wanting to overwhelm me, but letting me know he was fully there, fully present with me. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced. As we stood there, him pressing me gently against the wall, something shifted in me. I don't know if it was the closeness, the heat of the water, or just the way he was holding me, but I felt this spark, this urge to take things a little further. It was like all the shyness and uncertainty I'd had with him just melted away, and I suddenly knew I wanted to be the one to lead this time, to show him that I could meet him halfway and give back as much as he'd given me. I felt this confidence rise up, and I reached up, placing a hand on his shoulder and gently pushing him back, just enough to signal that I wanted to switch things up. He looked at me, maybe a little surprised, but he didn't resist. He just let me take the lead, this small, curious smile crossing his face, like he was both intrigued and impressed. I don't think he'd expected it from me, and that only made me feel more determined. I guided him back so that he was the one leaning against the wall now, and I took my time, wanting to savor every second. I felt this new sense of control, this surge of excitement at being the one to take initiative, and I could see that he was into it, that he was letting me have my moment without holding back. His eyes never left mine, that steady gaze full of trust and interest, like he wanted to see just how far I'd take it. I started kissing him, slow and deliberate, making sure he felt the same intensity he'd given me earlier. I ran my hands over his chest, feeling the water stream down between us, the warmth and closeness wrapping around us like a cocoon. My touch grew bolder, exploring every part of him, and I could feel his breath hitch, this quiet intake of breath that told me he was as into it as I was. It was empowering, knowing that I could make him feel the way he'd made me feel, that I could take charge and make this moment ours. As we kept moving together, I could feel his hands on my hips, his grip firm but letting me lead, letting me set the pace. It was different, being the one in control, and I loved every second of it. There was this deep connection between us, this shared understanding that neither of us had to say out loud. I wanted him to feel every bit of the care and passion I was pouring into this, to show him that this was just as meaningful to me as it was to him. The morning after that shower, everything felt charged between Alex and me. We both went to college, but we were in different groups, which meant our schedules didn't always line up. Still, the whole day, I kept thinking about what had happened, how it felt to be with him in that intense way. There was this constant thrill in the back of my mind, and I could tell he was feeling it too. During our breaks, we would catch each other in the hallways. It was brief moments, just quick smiles and those lingering looks, and every time I saw him, my heart would race a little. Then finally, during one of our longer breaks, I spotted him leaning against a wall, scrolling through his phone. I approached him, trying to act cool, but I could feel the excitement buzzing between us. He looked up at me, and that smile of his lit up my entire day. Then he asked if I wanted to go with him somewhere. I didn't hesitate. I could tell where this was heading, and honestly, I was all in. He led me to the nearest bathroom, a little less busy than some of the others, but still not completely empty. Once inside, it was like we were transported back to that first encounter. The door clicked shut behind us, and I could feel the adrenaline kicking in. Alex glanced around to make sure no one else was in there, then he turned to me with this teasing smile. I could see the playful challenge in his eyes, and it made my heart race. We moved toward the farthest stall, the one at the back, and I quickly checked the space to see if it was free. It was. As soon as we stepped in, I pulled him close, and we started kissing again, this familiar rhythm picking up between us. It felt so good to be in that moment, especially knowing we were in such a public place. The thrill of possibly getting caught added to the intensity, making everything feel even more electrifying. His hands found their way to my waist, and I could feel his grip tightening, pulling me in closer. We kept kissing, and it was deep, passionate, just like the shower, but with this added layer of urgency. I could feel the heat radiating off his body, and it was driving me wild. The small space made everything feel more intimate, our bodies pressed against each other, the sound of our kisses echoing slightly in the tiled stall. I could hear the distant noise of other students outside, and it made my heart pound. We were taking this risk, and that only heightened everything for me. I could feel him starting to respond, the way his body tensed as I pulled him closer, the warmth of his skin under my fingers. I reached down, my hands moving over his sides, feeling the muscles there and knowing that I was the one exploring him this time, just like in the shower. We were both lost in it, and even though we were being quick, every touch felt electric. He pulled me in, whispering soft breaths against my ear, and it felt like we were in our own world, cut off from everything else. I knew we didn't have long, but that just made the moment feel more urgent. Every sound outside felt magnified, and I loved it, but just as I thought we might take it a little further, I heard someone outside the stall, voices coming closer. Instantly, we froze, and I could feel Alex's body tense. We both glanced at the small gap in the door, and I knew we had to back off, at least for a moment. The excitement turned into a nervous thrill, and we quickly rearranged ourselves, trying to act casual. Just as we were about to slip back out of the stall, I heard the bathroom door creak open, and then a couple of guys walked in. They were chatting and laughing, completely unaware of what we had just been doing. I looked at Alex, and we both shared this wide-eyed moment of panic. We had to think quickly. The last thing we wanted was for anyone to figure out what we had been up to. So, on instinct, I whispered to Alex that we should act like we were just hanging out in there, maybe even smoking. It was a stretch, but we were both so caught up in the moment that we had to roll with it. Alex nodded and grabbed his pack of cigarettes from the bag, my hands shaking a bit from the adrenaline. I didn't usually smoke, but I needed to make this look convincing. I took out my first cigarette and fumbled a little as I got it lit. The smell of the smoke felt odd to me, but it was better than the alternative of getting caught in a compromising position. I took a puff, trying to look as casual as possible, and passed it to Alex. We stood there, side by side, pretending to take drags off the cigarette, all while keeping our ears perked for any signs that Marcus and the other guys were getting closer. The sound of their laughter echoed off the bathroom walls, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. "Dude, you actually smoke?" Alex asked, trying to sound nonchalant. I shot him a look, suppressing a grin. It was an awkward moment, but somehow it made everything feel even more exhilarating. Yeah, totally," I replied, trying to sound convincing as I took another puff. I could see Alex suppressing a laugh. I could tell he was just as wired as I was. The tension in the air made everything feel charged, and the thrill of almost getting caught, mixed with the relief of our quick thinking, kept us buzzing. They walked to the sinks, still talking, completely oblivious to us lurking in the stall. I leaned back slightly, pretending to relax, but my pulse was racing. We kept up the charade, taking quick puffs and exchanging glances, both of us trying to stifle our laughter. It felt like forever before the guys finally finished washing their hands and made their way toward the door. Just before they left, Marcus turned and looked around the bathroom. My heart dropped as he glanced toward our stall, and I held my breath. But then he shrugged it off, tossing a casual remark over his shoulder before stepping out, the door closing behind him with a click. We left the bathroom, walking side by side, adrenaline still pumping through us. The encounter had only drawn us closer, and I could feel that excitement building between us again, knowing that this was just the beginning of our secret adventures together. After everything that had happened with Alex, things between us felt like they'd hit this amazing high, so when it came time to head back to my hometown for a 3-week vacation, it was honestly tough. I was excited to see family and old friends, but the whole time, Alex was still in the back of my mind. I'd never met someone who could pull me in like that, where every memory just kept replaying itself, no matter what I was doing or where I was. I kept wondering what he was doing back at the dorm, thinking about those intense moments we'd shared, picturing how things would be when I got back. In those 3 weeks, we didn't talk much, just a few texts here and there. Alex wasn't really the type to constantly be on his phone, and I knew that going in. Still, I tried not to read too much into it, telling myself that things would just pick back up where they left off when I got back to campus. Honestly, I was almost counting down the days, already planning to surprise him when I got back. I even imagined the look on his face when I'd just show up out of nowhere, like in one of those cheesy romantic movies. Finally, the day arrived, and I got back to campus late afternoon. Instead of letting anyone know, I thought I'd go straight to the dorms and surprise him. First, I gave Marcus a quick call just to check if Alex was around, so I wouldn't walk into an empty room. Marcus picked up and sounded a bit distracted, but he confirmed that when he'd left that morning, Alex had been there. He was out and about himself, but he figured Alex would probably be hanging around the dorms chilling. So I headed up, my heart beating a little faster the closer I got. I kept picturing how it would go down. I'd open the door, he'd look up, maybe surprised but happy, and we'd just pick up where we left off. It was silly, but I couldn't shake the excitement. It was like those weeks away had only amplified whatever was going on between us. But as I approached the door to our room, I heard something that made me stop dead in my tracks. There were sounds coming from inside, unmistakable ones, the kind you only hear during, well, you know. It was female moans. At first, I thought maybe Marcus had gotten back early and brought someone over. The sounds were clear, these low moans mixed with a girl's voice, and it threw me off. I didn't want to barge in on him if that was the case, so I hesitated for a second. Then, I remembered that Marcus had literally told me he was out for the day, that he wasn't even on campus. It hit me like a punch to the gut. If Marcus wasn't in there, then the only other person it could be was Alex. And just like that, my stomach sank. I stood there, frozen, a mix of confusion and disbelief washing over me. Part of me wanted to turn around and leave, to just pretend I didn't know what was happening in there. but the other part needed to see it for myself to make sure that what I was hearing was real and not some messed up misunderstanding. So I took a deep breath, grabbed the handle, and pushed the door open. What I walked into hit me harder than I'd expected, even though part of me had already guessed. There, right in the middle of our room, was Alex, completely into it, with a girl from my junior year beneath him in lace stockings. I felt this strange numbness wash over me, like my mind couldn't fully process what I was seeing. It wasn't just the fact that he was with someone else, though that was hard enough. It was the realization that I'd been building something up in my mind, thinking there was more between us, while for him, it clearly didn't mean the same thing. They didn't even notice me at first, completely wrapped up in each other. But eventually, the sound of the door closing behind me caught Alex's attention, and he looked up, his eyes widening when he saw me standing there. He froze, and I could see the shock on his face, almost like he hadn't even thought of me coming back. The girl looked up too, confused, probably wondering who the hell I was and why I was just standing there. It felt like this hollow ache settled in my chest, this empty space where all that excitement and anticipation had been. All those thoughts I'd had of surprising him, of us picking things up right where we'd left off, just vanished. Without saying a word, I turned and walked back out, not even giving him a chance to respond. I heard him call my name, but I just kept moving, not looking back. The whole way down the hall, I kept telling myself to hold it together, that I'd deal with it later. But deep down, I knew I'd been blindsided. The worst part was realizing that, even though we hadn't been official, I'd thought there was something unspoken between us. I'd thought I'd meant something to him beyond just a fling or some kind of experiment. And yeah, I knew he was still figuring himself out, but I'd really thought we were on the same page. Seeing him with someone else, someone he could be with openly, without sneaking around, hit harder than I'd expected. It was like a harsh reminder that maybe I'd been too hopeful, thinking we could be something more. That night, I knew there was no avoiding him. No matter how much I wished I could just disappear, we still shared a room. By the time I got back, Alex was already there, sitting on his bed, looking more serious than I'd ever seen him. He glanced up when I walked in, and I could tell he wanted to say something. I didn't want to drag it out, so I just stood there, waiting for him to speak. After a moment, he finally did. He told me, in that straightforward way of his, that he hadn't realized I'd seen what was going on between us as something serious. He hadn't planned anything long-term, hadn't thought it was much more than, well, fun. And he apologized if I'd been hurt, said he hadn't meant to lead me on or make me think we were something we weren't. He looked genuinely sorry, but the words didn't land the way I thought they would. They just hung there, almost like a weight pressing down on me. I stood there, letting his words sink in. The whole time I'd been away, I'd been imagining this reunion, telling myself that we had something real, something worth waiting for. But standing there, hearing him say that he didn't see things that way, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And the weirdest part was realizing that he hadn't done anything wrong. We'd never actually defined anything. We weren't official. Hell, we hadn't even talked about it. I just filled in those blanks on my own, assuming he'd felt the same way I did. He was saying he didn't want to hurt me, and that this wasn't part of any plan to string me along. But honestly, knowing it hadn't been malicious or intentional somehow didn't make it hurt any less. If anything, it was worse. It was like being let down by the reality of things, not just by him. And yeah, as much as I wanted to be angry at him, I knew I couldn't. The pain I was feeling, that disappointment, was partly my own doing. I'd set my own expectations, gotten ahead of myself, believing we had something deeper than we actually did. I realized that I'd been building it up in my head, convincing myself that there was this unspoken connection between us. But if he didn't see it that way, if he didn't feel that same pull, then that connection was just me, projecting what I wanted onto him. So, standing there, trying to keep my voice steady, I told him that I needed some space. I said I couldn't pretend that I was fine with just being his occasional thing, that it would mess with me to keep being around him, knowing he was with other people. And he understood. He nodded, looking genuinely regretful, and didn't try to argue or convince me otherwise. It was clear we were on the same page, at least about ending things. Or maybe ending isn't even the right word since, technically, there was never anything official to end. I went to bed that night, lying there in the dark, just processing everything. The dorm room felt emptier than usual, and this weird hollow feeling settled in. I was angry, but mostly at myself for letting things go this far. I kept replaying the whole situation, asking myself where I'd gone wrong, or if I'd missed some obvious sign that this wasn't what I thought it was. But in the end, there was no real answer. It was just life in all its messy, complicated reality. We stayed civil after that. We still shared a room, so it wasn't like I could avoid him completely. But things weren't the same anymore. There was this distance between us, this understanding that whatever had been there before was over. It stung, but I knew it was better than holding on to something that wasn't real. I had to remind myself that even though it hadn't turned out the way I'd hoped, it wasn't all bad. I'd gotten to experience something intense, something that showed me what I wanted. And yeah, it sucked that it didn't go further, but that's just how it goes sometimes. So yeah, that's the story. I know it's not the perfect ending, but life's rarely that clean cut, right? Sometimes you have these incredible moments with people, and then you have to let them go. It hurts, but you learn from it, and you move on. Real life isn't always like the movies or the stories we tell ourselves in our heads. Sometimes it's just messy and imperfect, and things don't go the way you want. But you learn, and you keep going. And who knows? Maybe there's someone else out there who'll be looking for the same thing, and it'll be different next time. At least, that's what I'm hoping.